This is Dateline News and Conversation. Today is Christmas in Russia. They follow the Orthodox calendar. And I have to say, for me, it was not a very merry Christmas. I spent the afternoon video recording the annual Christmas spectacle put on by the Children's Center for Children with Physical and Psychological Challenges. They put it on every year. The Chekhov Theater, the famous Chekhov Theater in Yalta, was packed, and it was really delightful. But I had this terrible feeling in my stomach, and I've had it for the last couple of days, really, because of what Trump just did in Venezuela. And after the spectacle, it was a 90-minute, wonderful, very uplifting concert spectacle. We went to the Vemesti Center, where there was a meal that was prepared for the children and for their parents and a few friends. And at the end, when most of the children were gone, there were a handful of us parents that were sitting at the table. The conversation immediately went to Trump, Maduro, Venezuela. Putin should have taken Kiev years ago. Putin should not be talking to Donald Trump anymore. And does this look like war? So here we are. It's January 7th, Christmas Day in Crimea. I'm going to begin with a quote. It really states where we're at. My guest tonight is Sylvia Demarest. She's back. She just penned an article in her Substack blog, and it began with this quote from George Kennan. I need to begin with this because this is really where we're at. We should dispense with the aspiration to be liked or to be regarded as the repository of a high-minded international altruism. We should stop putting ourselves in the position of being our brother's keeper and refrain from offering moral and ideological advice. We should cease to talk about vague, unreal objectives such as human rights, the raising of living standards, and democratization. The day is not far off when we are going to have to deal, get this now, in straight power concepts. The less we are hampered by idealistic slogans, the better. End of quote. Sylvia Demarest, welcome back to the show.
Hey, Regis.
Boy, does that quote ever hit it on the head? You know, he was a diplomat. He was a writer. He was a public speaker, and he basically charted the trajectory that the United States has been on, since the end of World War II and the Truman Doctrine. Sylvia, you wrote an incredible article. Once again, hard-hitting, right to the point. Tell me why you started the article with this quote from George Kennan.
Well, it's clear. Kennan, by the way, wrote that many decades ago, and he was not a bad man. He did come up with the idea of how to deal with the Soviet Union during the Cold War, but he also opposed the expansion of NATO. And really wanted the United States to reconcile with Russia. But the idea of straight concepts of power is exactly what we're dealing with right now. And I would like to tell your audience that the article that I published is published at Populist Talk, populistmessage.substack. You could Google that. And the name of it is A Review of Donald Trump's Excellent Venezuelan Adventure and Its Potential Consequences. And I think what we want to talk about today are the potential consequences. And you know, people have been saying for a long time that all of the elements are here for a global war. And those elements include the United States being in a position of, of watching its dominance, both militarily and economically, become degraded as a result of Russia's advances and especially China. What's happening in China is incredible. I'm not saying it's all good, but here we have a country of over 1 billion people who have become incredibly well educated, who've become dominant not only in the manufacture of small and insignificant goods, but in the manufacture of essential items globally. And what has happened is that the United States, as a result of having let go of its manufacturing capacity through the being overtaken by neoliberalism and this financialization, has created an economy that cannot really respond to the military advances that Russia has shown in terms of missile technology and the economic advantages that China has now demonstrated. And so the United States is in a position of either having to share global power or to try to come up with ways to remain the global hegemon, both through the use of the dollar system and through being willing, more than anybody else at this point in time, to use its military in an aggressive way. And that's what we're seeing right now. And there are specific reasons why this is happening now in Venezuela, which we could get into, Regis.
Sylvia, that was a great introduction. And that brings us to January 3rd, when Trump finally followed through and invaded. Didn't really invade with ground troops, but with all kinds of Delta Force people, and captured Maduro and his wife, and then brought them to the United States, where now they're standing trial. Sylvia, I don't know how I can overestimate what I think happened with that blatant, brazen action of Donald Trump, the national security services, the deep state, whatever. What were your impressions, Sylvia, when you heard that, when you watched it on television?
Well, you know, I didn't know any more about it than anybody else. And so I've started looking into it. It's very clear to me that this could not have happened without cooperation and assets on the ground that permitted this to happen. We still don't know all the details, but what probably happened is that there were elements in the national security state of Venezuela that decided that they needed some kind of reset with the United States. And my essay goes into the history of the sanctions and the damage that that did to Venezuela and the losses that Venezuela has suffered as a result of that. So I'm not even sure that all those assets that I wrote about in my essay were actually employed, or whether or not there were just people on the ground that permitted this pathway to be created to the compound so that they could snatch Maduro. The only things that we really know for sure right now are that Maduro and his wife are in custody, that the wife got the crap beat out of her, apparently for some reason, because she had very serious evidence of violence when they appeared in court, and that the entire contingent of security guards, Cuban security guards, that were guarding Maduro were exterminated. That we know, that 32 Cuban guards were killed. Now, there are various rumors running around about how and why that happened. But if there were people on the ground that were allowed to operate by various elements of the Venezuelan state, they could have set things up to where it wouldn't have been possible to respond for long enough for the capture and the extraction to take place, because the helicopters were on the ground in Venezuela for less than an hour. So we don't know very much. I think it's pretty clear that there was cooperation on the ground. I don't know what the Venezuelan state hopes to achieve from that, but clearly a reset was necessary given all of the things that were going on and given the degree of problems that the sanctions and the blockade were creating. Now, the Venezuelan state is intact. There has not been regime change. Uh, the Bolivarian revolution is still in control of the military. They're still in control of the government. They're still in control of the state. What that means in terms of what will happen in the future is unknown. But right now, there seems to be some negotiations going on the part of the United States in an effort to force certain changes to take place. And as I said, I think there were various things that occurred that came to the attention of the national security state in the United States that compel this to take place at this time. And we can talk about that next if you'd like to.
Well, before we get into that, what do you think that this brazen act of the United States of America in violation? You're an attorney, and everything I'm reading was all of this was in violation of the United States Constitution. Congress did not approve this, a violation of international law, and a violation of the United Nations Charter. There's an enormous UN Security Council meeting where just about everybody condemned the United States for what they did, including Russia and China. What is the message, Sylvia? Now, before we get into who did it and what was the intention, but what was the message sent, number one, to Russia and China, who have enormous investments of all kinds, from development to military weapons, Russian military jets, Russian missile defense systems, which didn't react at all. But what is the message, in your opinion, that was sent to the entire world?
Before I get to the kid and quote my essay, what I said was a quote from Mao Zedong: "Power grows out of the barrel of a gun." What the message that the United States deep state is sending around the world is that we're going to do what we think we need to do to maintain the power of the United States globally. And if you don't like it, you're going to have to confront us and make us stop. And that is you can have all the UN Security Council meetings that you want. You can cite every chapter and verse of the Charter of International Law, of the United States Constitution. But if the national security state of the United States has decided that certain actions are necessary in order to preserve the international power of the United States is going to act until a countervailing force forces it to stop. And that is where we are. The question now becomes, because Russia and China have done everything possible to avoid having this confrontation. So the United States is going to move forward. Every country in the Western Hemisphere is going to be told, you either become an asset of the United States and do what the United States says, or we're going to do a regime change operation on you, or we're going to smother your economy and make you scream until you do what we tell you to do. The United States is going to take Greenland because Greenland has resources, but Greenland is all about Russia and the Arctic. You have to understand, the Western world is a spent force at this point. The United States has given up its manufacturing capacity. Europe is a mess. And the initiative and the power and the resources are now in Russia, in the Arctic, in South America, and in Africa. The energy and the manufacturing power is now in China. So the United States is going to have to do something in order to maintain its power base. What has apparently been decided right now is they're going to take over the Western Hemisphere. They're going to force every country to do exactly what the United States tells them to do. They're going to take Greenland because Greenland sits right on the exit from the Northern Passage. And Greenland also gives the United States more depth in the Arctic. We are looking at straight power being exercised, and power will continue until power is met with a countervailing force. This is an unfortunate message. It's a very frightening message. It's a very devastating message for the people of this planet, but that's where we are now. And I don't think the national security state of the United States has any plans to back down at this point.
Well, I tell you that I started out talking about this horrible feeling that I had in my stomach, and I've had it ever since January 3rd. I could not believe this brazen violation of international law, the UN Charter, a completely lawless action. And as you've stated so clearly, this is an exercise of pure power. It comes out of a gun. And this is all the United States has anymore. It's all it has is the gun. It has no more other influence in the rest of the world except threats of violence, starvation through sanctions, etc. Now, you're talking about the national security state, and you don't think they're going to change course. Jesus, you know what comes to mind, Sylvia, is Dr. Strangelove. There isn't just one crazy person. There's got to be a number of absolutely insane, and I want to say, Sylvia, evil people buried away in this national security state. You mentioned it's not Trump. It's this national security state that is driving this. You wanted to dig down a little bit deeper in that. Let's go for it.
Well, I mean, the problem, as I've described, is that the United States is in a fix. We don't no longer have the manufacturing depth. We're deeply in debt. Our economy has been taken over by financialized entities that cannot be controlled. They're looting everything and everybody. Unlike China, they're unable to really accomplish anything in terms of rebuilding the country or putting the country on a decent path. So what are they going to do to continue to maintain power? And once these sanctions got put on to Venezuela, Venezuela was really faced with a choice. The people could starve, or they could turn to other countries for help. And so they turned to China, and China, as you mentioned, has invested a great deal of money. They turned to Russia for assistance with the military, and they even turned to Iran to be able to achieve some kind of depth in terms of defense. And so I think three considerations kind of came to a head and forced this thing to take place at this moment in time. And the first thing was, if you'll remember, in April of 2025, China put into effect basically controls over rare earths. Now, rare earths are needed for just about everything in terms of electronics, in terms of of technology, and particularly in terms of weaponry. And China had just about achieved control over the Orinoco Belt, where a lot of these kinds of minerals are available. The second thing that happened is I just found out that the Revolutionary Guard of Iran had been building a drone factory in Venezuela, and that drone factory was almost complete. And then Russia had just signed an agreement with Venezuela to incorporate more closely into their national defense. So I think the the national security state felt that now was the time to go in there and force not necessarily a change of the regime, but to force the regime to do something about those basic agreements. And let me tell you what is involved with the rare earths, because remember, China now has a monopoly on rare earths. They produce about 90% of all rare earths globally, but those do not come from seed stock within China. It comes from things all around the world. What China has learned how to do is they've learned how to refine them and to refine them effectively. We don't have that capacity yet. And there's a lot of environmental considerations that are negative in terms of refining rare earths. So I think what the United States wants to do is they want to refine rare earths. They want to keep China from getting the seed stocks for rare earth. They want to do it in some other country. And that country apparently right now is going to be Venezuela, because Venezuela has Coltrane. They have uh, tin ore. Now, tin is necessary for the soldering of all of these different electronic components. They have all these rare earths. They have bauxite, they have gold, they have lithium, and they have them in large amounts. So, what are these things used for? Uh, Coltrane is used in every element of technology. Uh, all of these things are absolutely essential for missiles, for to create chips, uh, to to be able to do anything in terms of weaponry. So this was going on in Venezuela. Foolishly, it was generated as a result of U.S. policy. And so now we have a situation where Russia and China are invested in this country. And the United States has decided the country can't do business with them anymore, although they haven't said that. And so this is where we are. Russia and China's going to have to make a decision. Now, you talked about um, this boat being boarded and seized, and it was seized in the North Atlantic because the United States chased it down. There was apparently a Russian submarine somewhere nearby, and so now you've got international shipping that's involved in this as well. So we have quite a fine mess on our hands. Where it's going to go, your guess is as good as mine, but uh, the United States is not going to back down. There's going to have to be some resolution of this uh, through peaceful means or other means. And unfortunately, given everything that's going on, I don't see the trust and the mechanism set up for this to be peacefully resolved.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it's way beyond any possibility of a peaceful resolution to this anywhere, way beyond a peaceful resolution in Ukraine. Um, and uh, I, we have to agree the United States is not going to stop unless somebody stops them.
I'm
And
not
the
sure.
only,
I'm not sure the United States feels like it can stop. I think this is. I think the national security state feels like this is existential for the United States. Either there's going to have to be a complete redo of U.S. policy, and that includes U.S. policy in Europe. You want peace in Europe? Here's the way you do it. You take NATO and you bring it back to the lines where NATO was when the USSR dissolved. You take the missiles out of Eastern Europe. You take U.S. assets out of Eastern Europe. You stop this war with Russia. You stop providing Ukraine with the mechanism and the weapons to fight a war with Russia. You recognize that Russia has security interest in that part of the world. You allow Europe to enter into arrangements with Russia so that they can have a reasonable energy at a reasonable cost, so that Europe's manufacturing capacity doesn't go down. You recognize that China has national security interest in East Asia, and you put your efforts into rebuilding the capacity of the United States to compete globally. But I don't see the financiers, the billionaires, or the national security state in the United States being satisfied with that. So, what we have here is the kind of dispute that creates conditions for a major war. And your guess is as good as mine as to where this goes. But I also, like you, Regis, I don't have a good feeling about it.
Well, let's talk about whether or not there's somebody strong enough to confront the United States, because any kind of peaceful talk is long gone now after this action in Venezuela. A lot of people have been saying, why didn't Russia and why didn't China come in to the Caribbean and confront the United States right then and there? And from where I'm sitting, that is totally, absolutely ludicrous. On the one hand, China is completely capable of defending itself in East Asia. All the war games that the Pentagon has done over and over again show the United States losing any war in Asia with China. They can't do it. All they have is a bunch of battleships, not battleships, warships, a bunch of aircraft carriers, which both China and North Korea can eliminate in a matter of hours. What China can't do and is not equipped to do is fight a war in the Western Hemisphere. It's not equipped. Sylvia, the same thing goes for Russia. Russia's got a bunch of military weapons, offensive and defensive, in Venezuela, designed to help Venezuela defend itself. Somehow or other, that was shut down. Russia has got its hands full right now in Ukraine and in Eastern Europe, and with Western Europe, beating the war drums for the last year, now talking about even sending England, France, and Germany, we're going to send some troops to Ukraine. There's no way that Russia and China could fight a war independently or with each other against the United States half a world away. So, Sylvia, where does that leave us?
Well,
the United States.
It puts Russia. It puts Russia in a very bad position, because I think that Putin's strategy has been, we're going to fight a war of attrition, and it will slowly grind down the West's capacity to fight such wars, and it will ultimately lead to peace. What it has ultimately led to is more war. And so now I think Russia is under a tremendous amount of pressure to increase what's going on in Ukraine. I just read where there was an agreement. The United States participated in the talks, but didn't go along with the agreement to actually put boots on the ground in Western Ukraine. That puts Russia in a very bad position. Uh, Everything you say about Russia's capacity and China's capacity to confront the United States in a conventional war is true. The reason the United States can project force globally is because of the Navy and our Air Force. But those Navy assets could be easily sunk, and those Air Force assets have to have some place to land near the field of battle, and those bases and airports could be taken out. The problem is that doesn't really solve anything, because, yes, it is recognized, I think even by the United States, that it cannot fight a conventional war with China or Russia in their venue. But they also recognize that China and Russia cannot fight a conventional war in the Western Hemisphere. So this confrontation will continue until such time as something happens that forces the major elements of this to have a relook. And I have written about this, and I want to emphasize it again. The reason that a conventional war is not going to happen is not only that the United States would lose a conventional war against either China or Russia, but that once that conventional war is lost, the United States has 5 Ohio-class submarines, which are underwater somewhere globally, and each have the capacity to fire off about 175 nuclear weapons, that no one can be assured that the United States would not turn to rather than accept defeat. Remember, the United States is the only country that's actually used nuclear weapons at the end of World War II, and I think that was done for several reasons. The first, most significant, was to let the world know that the United States was willing to do that in the event of a serious threat of loss, and that's where we are. So it's sort of a Hobson's choice, and the countries of the world are going to have to make a major decision about how they deal with this particular issue, and I don't know what that decision will be or how it will be implemented, but I think that it has been decided. We're going to take the Western Hemisphere. We're not the United States, the Western Hemisphere. They're not going to allow any country to oppose them in the Western Hemisphere. And I think Greenland is going to become a part of the United States one way or another. And taking Greenland has national security implications for both Russia and China. And I don't think they should allow that to happen.
I want to get back to fighting some kind of conventional war. We agree that the United States can't win that. In fact, the next war is not going to be conventional, in my opinion. It's going to be with missiles, it's going to be with drones, and ultimately it's going to be someone's going to go nuclear. But Sylvia, as I look at what the United States has been doing really for the last, throughout the Cold War, they got 900 military bases in, I don't know, 190 countries around the world. They got tens of thousands of American troops in all of these countries, tens of thousands in Korea, Okinawa, Japan, down through the Pacific, all across Europe, NATO. I mean, so heavily fortified with American bases and American troops. It's unbelievable. Now, well, they've been in Sweden. Now Sweden and Finland are part of NATO. When I look at that, Sylvia, and you talked about the economic situation in the United States, the United States is really overextended. How long can it continue to do this?
As long as the world accepts the United States dollar, they can continue.
Bingo.
Now, herein lies the rub. We're talking about military confrontations. There are other vulnerabilities that the United States has that Russia and China can exploit. We have
Bingo.
we have an enormous bubble in these data centers. There's not enough energy to run them. Energy costs in the United States are going up. We have all of this overextension in the stock market. Everybody's money is in the stock market. We cannot make anything here. And so if the container ships stop coming to U.S. ports, the shelves on the United States department stores, etc., will soon become bare. So it's not a one-way street here. There are a lot of other things that the world can do. But once again, I get back to the fact that what this means is it means confrontation on a very, very dangerous level. International trade is something that's done on the basis of trust and on the basis of legality and legal instruments and proper payment and proper acknowledgement of the right of travel, etc. All of that is now under attack in terms of stopping these boats and taking them over. Now I understand Trump has announced that Venezuela is going to give the United States 30 to 50 million barrels. Well, Venezuela only produces 700 to 900,000 barrels a day. So that means several months without any income for the Venezuelan state. So there's so many moving parts here that I think it's very difficult to say what will happen, except to say very clearly that this is an enormous crisis. Uh, it has just begun. The extent of the crisis, we don't know. And it will only be felt in the United States when the stock market starts going down, when there aren't enough chips for these data centers, and when the container ships stop arriving at U.S. ports. Those are the pressure points that Russia and China has right now. And I think it would be relatively easy for something to be done that would impact all of those venues. And that would be very harmful to the United States. In other words, this is an extremely dangerous period of time.
Yeah. Well, we both agree on that, and I think a lot of people now do too. You mentioned the dollar, the national security state, even Trump, he's a Minas Habens. He doesn't have much upstairs. He doesn't read. I'm not sure how really literate he is, but it's been known for some time that Russia, China, India, and other countries have already been trading in their own currencies, that the yuan is becoming used more and more for international trade. This is a huge threat to the United States. I saw a video the other day, and it was really good. It was talking about the United States economy and what it's really built on. It's built on fiat currency. They just keep printing dollars. But if the rest of the world stops using those dollars, is one thing, which they're doing. The other thing is that China is holding, I don't know, something like $288 billion of American treasury notes, American debt. Russia is
not any longer. It's much less than that now.
But here's the implication: Russia holds none, but it has been argued that if China and Russia together, and China would dump all of its debt, and Russia and China together overnight with India could crash the United States economy by not using the dollar at all.
Well, I think trying to go that way is, first of all, English is still the most common language spoken globally. The dollar, despite everything that you say, is still the predominant currency in about 60% of all global transactions. Saddam Hussein thought he could transact oil in a non-dollar currency. Look what happened to him. They were doing the same thing in Venezuela. Look what's happened to them. They're going to go back to transacting in the dollar. The United States, as an issuer of its own currency, cannot go bankrupt. Now, they can enact policies that results in the decline of the value of the dollar, but you're already seeing that. Part of the reason why you see these enormous increases in the price of real estate, these enormous increases in share values, that's a reflection of a form of inflation in and of itself. Inflation in ordinary goods and services has also increased in the United States. But the dollar itself is not going to go away anytime soon. Now, the yuan, which you mentioned, the Chinese currency, is not traded globally. And China doesn't want to do that because they don't want to give up control over the value of the yuan. Giving up control over the value of the yuan means it could strengthen, which would impact the ability of China to sell goods abroad. So it's a very complicated situation. There are a lot of moving parts, and it's not an easy answer as to how to deal with this crisis. The United States had several choices about how to go about this. And I just want to say, Trump is not the one making the decisions here. Every American president in my lifetime has done the bidding of the national security state. They have just said nicer and sweeter words about what they were doing. Trump is out there saying nasty words. And so it's kind of ripped the face of the whole enterprise off. and has exposed the raw power that's underneath it. It's no longer Mr. Nice Guy. That's why I put the Kennan quote out there. We're there. We're dealing with straight power concepts. Now, is that the way to handle this crisis? Probably not, but that's the path that has been chosen. And until some other path is chosen, China, Russia, Iran, India, and all of the BRICS countries are faced with a crisis. They either comply with US dictate or they find a way to resist that does not result in a wider war. And unfortunately, the United States, I think, is intent on getting there. It's going to be their way or the war way, which is where we are.
So, Sylvia, that begs the question. I'm thinking back to, I don't know, the majority of American people, like you and I, who grew up there, who were indoctrinated since birth, and that the United States is a peace-loving country. It's the city on the hill, a shining light, you know, chosen by God to spread this around the world. What can Americans be possibly thinking, Sylvia, when they...
We're the most propagandized country in the world. Every effort is being made to create a narrative and to enforce that narrative and to censor anybody that goes contrary to the narrative. That's number one. Number two,
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Number two, we love a winner. Okay? When you go blazing guns in there and you come out with a guy in less than an hour, you're a winner. Americans love a winner. Number three, if you tell them that their security is at risk unless these things are done, most Americans will go along with it. And number four, the way the political situation is set up, and it's dominated by money, 90% of Americans have no say. 95, 96, 97, 98% of Americans have no say in the policy of the country. The people that have a say in the policy are the people that fund campaigns. And right now, what you're seeing is the theft of Citgo and the theft of Venezuelan gold and the rush of everybody that wants to get a piece of that, including a Singer and Elliott Management and Conoco and everybody else that can possibly file a lawsuit to steal the $22 million value of gold, the $22 billion value of Venezuelan gold, the $13 billion value of Citgo, which has 3 refineries in the area that I'm from that refines this crude that comes from Venezuela. Those are the people that are benefiting from this, and those are the people that are running this policy.
Sylvia, I'm not there anymore, but I love sports. I've never been able to get that out of my system. I love the competition. I'm forced to watch YouTube highlights of different sports that I'm interested in. And what I'm seeing with the college football season, now in the playoff situation, the National Football League's season is ending. The stadiums are packed all over the country. I mean, these tickets, they're not cheap. You don't get in there for a couple of bucks. Basketball arenas are packed. Hockey arenas are packed. I have to ask you this because I'm in Russia and I don't read American news and media anymore, but are Americans not being told what the rest of the world is saying and reacting? Are they not even being told that what Trump just did, blazing guns, is against international law, the UN Charter? Is the media completely not telling them anything about this? Help me out with this.
There are 2 kinds of people in the United States: those that still pay attention to the mainstream media and believe what the mainstream media says, and those that do not and go to other sources and may actually read international law. Remember, there are over 350 million people in the United States. Even if 10% of those people are the ones that are participating in all of these sports and all of that, and it's more than that. It's still 30, 40, 50 million people. And yes, every arena is packed. People are sports crazy. I'm one of them. And that's what the United States people have their attention focused on. And they never have, Regis, and they're not going to pay attention to events abroad unless and until those events interfere with their lives right here in the United States. And I don't think Russia or China or Iran or India or any of these other countries want to go that far. So here, that's where we are. We've got the national security state in the United States that's freaked out about the situation where they don't have access to the things that they need to be able to maintain the military and economic power of the United States. They're trying to find a way to rectify that situation. They're embarked on this path. I don't know how far they plan to go, but I think at least they plan to take the Western Hemisphere and Greenland. And that's the situation that we're faced with. And so the rest of the world is going to have to decide either to live with that or to figure out some way to confront it. And frankly, I don't see that there's an easy answer to any of this.
So, Sylvia, who's next? In the Western Hemisphere, Trump has already threatened the Colombian president. He better watch his ass. He could be next. The current president of Nicaragua told her if she didn't follow orders, it was going to be very bad for her. Marco Rubio has been lusting to take Cuba. I mean, that's his origins. And then when you move out of the Western Hemisphere, we're looking at Israel. We're looking at Iran. We're looking at Trump. He already bombed Iran once. He just met with Netanyahu again. You know, the number one guest in the White House and the most popular person in Congress. What the hell were they talking about if not an attempt to take down Iran? Sylvia, geez.
Those are the plans. The plan is those are all the plans. Every country that opposes the United States and the Western Hemisphere needs to be concerned that they're going to be attacked. And I think Trump is pretty much controlled by these Jewish billionaires that fund his campaign and fund the Republican campaign and fund the Democratic campaign, frankly. You know, one of the things I want to say here is I'm not sure that this would be any different if we had a Democratic president.
No, you're right.
This is being controlled by the financiers and the national security state. And unless and until there's a counter movement of Americans to actually do something about militarism, this is going to continue. Now, I'm sure you're aware of events in Iran. There are people on the street with guns who are opposing the administration. There's a huge water crisis. There's a huge crisis. I mean, they've been under sanctions for a long time. They've been cut off from finances. They can't develop their country. Same situation as with Venezuela. And yes, there probably is going to be another attack. And so what I would say to the people that oppose the United States is you better make hay while the sun shines. And if Israel is going to attack Iran, Israel needs to be wiped out. And if the United States is going to attack Iran, then U.S. bases around that area need to be attacked. And that's World War III, y'all. And that's not a pretty situation. But that's where we are.
Yeah. Well, 30 minutes ago, we didn't talk about Iran. We didn't talk about the Middle East. But Iran is not some weak state in some weak country that hasn't been tried before. They inflicted heavy damage on Israel in this recent skirmish or war, whatever you want to call it. They've been working feverishly to prepare themselves for what they know is coming. They know it's coming. Unlike Venezuela, they didn't have a clue. They were under sanctions, they were threatened, whatever, but Iran has been under siege, not with sanctions, but militarily for a very long time. Sylvia.
Do they have nerve? Do they have the nerve? Do they have the courage? They fought the last war with one hand tied behind their back. They didn't attack any U.S. assets, although U.S. assets were being used to knock down their missiles. They didn't attack Jordan, even though Jordan was being used. They didn't attack Cyprus, even though Cyprus was a launching pad. They didn't attack Armenia, although Armenia was clearly involved in this as well. They didn't really attack Israel with everything that they had to attack Israel because all of these countries do not want World War III. Okay, so we are taking advantage of their reticence and their lack of desire to have total war. Now, Israel is in a very weak state right now, very weak. It's a very divided country. These people have been driven crazy as a result of what's gone on for the last 80 years. And now all of this information about the origin of Israel and all the genocide and the treatment of Palestinians, all of that is coming out, and the rest of the world doesn't like it. You know, when you ask the question, does Israel have the right to exist, then you have to go back and look at how Israel was created. And now it's very clear that Israel was created by essentially using terrorism and threats and violence and murder and other things to drive 1 million people out of their homes and to seize those homes, seize those businesses, seize that property in order to create the state. No compensation has ever been paid for any of that. So, does Israel have the right to exist? You answer that question. Look at the history. What's going on with the people of Israel? They have been so propagandized and so terrified as a result of the conditions that they've been living under that they've all gone a little bit crazy. And it's affected the entire makeup of the country. A lot of people are leaving. A lot of IDF soldiers are committing suicide. Anybody that has to look at what has happened to the Palestinians since the start of the Gaza war and has a conscience has to feel terrible about everything. So this is trauma all over the world,
Yeah.
and there's no way for people to come in and to say, look, there's a different path we can do. We can, the United States isn't finished. The United States has a glorious future ahead of it if we will rebuild and restructure our economy around something other than militarism. But this is where we are. And it pains me to say it, but unless and until there's a real threat to the security of the United States, and I don't mean as from war, because then the American people will unify around that, but I mean to the lifestyle of Americans, to where there's a reason for them to oppose militarism. I think the national security state will have a free hand in terms of trying to deal with this crisis. And it is a crisis. The United States is in crisis. And this is how they've decided to deal with the crisis.
I want to get back to Iran. Here's why I think this could be the shot heard round the world, the thing that triggers the unspeakable. Iran is in an existential, real threat to its survival. It's already suffered tremendously. The United States wants to blow it back to the Stone Age. They've threatened that. Iran is going to have to use everything it has, everything, if it is attacked by Israel and the United States. And Sylvia, they got tens of thousands of missiles, drones. Who knows what they have in weapons from Russia and China, hypersonic missiles. We don't know that. We don't even know if they have a nuclear weapon. Israel does. But if Iran is attacked, I believe it cannot just give in. And I don't believe it will give in. I believe there's enough people in power in Iran who are going to fight to the finish. And
Seymour Hersh wrote a book called The Samson Option. And what that book said was that if Israel is faced with an existential threat, it will use nuclear weapons.
yeah,
So the same threat that the United States is holding over the world, Israel is holding over the world as well. And that is,
exactly.
if you fight too hard against our aggression, now we're going to be aggressive. We're going to take any any land that we think we're entitled to. We're going to attack anybody we think we're entitled to. But if you fight back and you're too effective, we're going to nuke you. This is where we are, Regis.
Yeah,
Now, I don't have an answer. I don't have an answer, but
I,
that's
I,
where we are. So,
I agree with
yes,
you.
could Iran wipe out Israel? Yes, Iran could wipe out Israel. Could China and Russia wipe out the United States? Yes, China and Russia can wipe out the United States. But what would happen in response? They would fire nuclear weapons. We've got all these Ohio class submarines. Germany sold Israel submarines. They're nuclear equipped Israeli submarines running around. You can't do away with the threat that they will turn to nuclear weapons. And that is the threat that they're holding over everybody in order to allow them to have a free hand in dealing with what they think they need to deal with in order to secure what they need to secure uh, for Israel and for the United States. I'm sorry, but that's just
Yeah,
the reality.
and I think that this could be the flashpoint. Iran could be the flashpoint that triggers the unspeakable, what you and I are very afraid of. There's no path to peace here, okay? The path is only more conflict until it finally escalates out of control, and
Well,
we're ever so close to that.
Russia and China had better get together and figure out a way to deal with this, because you're right. This is not a good path that we're on, and I think the current leadership in both Israel and the United States are willing to go along with what their national security state recommends. And, in the past, what we've had have been presidents who fought against that. I don't know if people realize it, but there were several different plans that were presented to Truman and to Kennedy for a decapitation strike of the USSR before the USSR had the weaponry to fight back, and the U.S. presidents didn't go along with that. In Trump's first administration, there were assets within the Pentagon that blunted some of the things that other assets within the Pentagon wanted to do. All of that has now been cleared away, and the people that run that run the world, and they're not just in the United States. The people that run the world are now in charge, and they have the ear of the national security state, not only of the United States but of Britain and Europe, and I think they have decided that now is the time uh, to deal with what they see as these national security threats. And so they've begun with this blockade and with this threat to Venezuela, and they've left the government there in place. And so it's not been a regime change. It's just been a regime threat. Uh, we'll do more unless you do what we say, and that same threat applies to every government in the Western Hemisphere. You do what we say, or there will be more.
I'm absolutely certain that President Xi Jinping in China and Vladimir Putin in Russia have been on the telephone, as have all their lower level diplomats talking to each other, including military. Uh, the two of them are faced with an existential threat uh, because they know at some point that the United States is going to try to force them to their knees to give in. And I don't think either one of them uh, is going to do that. And I have to think that they're in very, very deep consultation now, probably with India, for sure with Iran, and who knows who else. North Korea for sure is involved in these conversations. Sylvia, you and I both lived during the Cuban Missile Crisis, and we remember how terrified we were. People who didn't live through that have no idea what the fear of that is. People like you and I today, as we have been discussing for the last 50 minutes, what we're facing is so more frightening and terrorizing than anything that could have happened out of the Cuban Missile Crisis. Sylvia, I don't know what to do. I had one friend said, pray. If you pray and you believe in a God, whoever, whatever it is, pray. That prayer is powerful. I don't know what else is going to work, Sylvia. We're sitting, as you said, as nuclear hostages. Sylvia,
Well,
thanks.
the
Go ahead.
calculus has changed. Clearly, it's now
Yeah.
clear that discussions with the United States, discussions with NATO, uh, that won't lead to anything. And so the calculus has changed. What that means in terms of the future is yet to be determined. Uh, and unfortunately, that's where we are right now.
Sylvia, keep on writing. It's very important. I put your Substack website scrolled across the bottom of the scene many times, and I'll put it in the description of the show. We'll stay in touch as we always have, Sylvia, and as things happen, I'm going to count on you to coming back and helping to bring some clarity to this.